G'day, Josh here, and we are here today with two Chess Rush pros, Chaos, Seraph and Warreor, for a special little project where we're going to talk about Chess Rush balancing, the current meta and improvements that we feel like could be made to the game. So before we welcome Chaos and Warreor to this little chat, just want to mention that not only was this project something that Chaos Seraph brought to the group, but we had a wider group that we were working on this with. So to mention each of the names that we had input from: Chaos Seraph, Warreor, Spooby, Nasty and Nate, Maxi D, Dark Magician, and myself all had input on what's to come. So we've got a series of balance changes to talk about. The first being heroes, the second being combos, and then some bug fixes we'll touch on at the end. So we're going to go through the heroes. We tried to keep this as tight as possible when we were working through this, and we didn't touch on every hero, just those that we thought warranted changes. The first one being Famine. So I'm going to talk about the changes that we discussed, and then the two of you can explain why those are relevant. So Famine's HP is currently 1600, 3200, and 6400 at 1, 2, and 3 star. We suggested that those be increased to 1700, 3400, and 6800, and then also her attack speed decreased from 1.1 to 1 second, which means she'll be auto attacking faster as well.
Yeah, so I think hunters in general are in a decent spot in the mid game and early games. As a comp in the late game, could use a boost overall.
We're definitely struggling with your connection here a little bit, Warreor, so we might have to get Chaos to carry the majority of this, but I think we got the gist of it. What about your thoughts on those Famine changes, Chaos, and why we implemented those, or suggested that those get implemented?
Yeah, we basically thought that Famine was a little too squishy, and having a bunch of attack speed doesn't matter, or attack damage doesn't matter. Like when she scales with her passive, if she has no attack speed, you could have 5k attack and only auto once every 5 seconds, and that'd be fine. So by the time she gets to the end game, she's already down to like 10-20% of her HP bar and gets maybe 2 or 3 attacks off with her passive. So it's almost like she doesn't have a skill at that point.
Because her ability, the longer she survives, the better it is. So you want to be getting more attacks off and having her survive a bit longer. So we'll keep this rolling. So Bangar was the next hero that we addressed. This was a pretty simple change. Taunt duration is currently 2, 3, or 4 seconds based on his star rating, and we suggested increasing that to 3, 4, and 5 seconds. Thoughts on why that was the case?
Bangar is pretty weak right now. He's one of the weaker units in the game. So there have to be weak warriors, but he could definitely use a little love.
Yeah, we lost you at the end there, but yeah, you agree with that, Chaos?
Yeah, and the taunt duration is one way to do it. I think with how little impact the taunt has, even though it's technically a silence, having it be 3 seconds is fine. Especially because like soon as Bangar dies, it goes away anyway.
Yeah. And it does give him a little bit more sustain, as it also is tied into his ability immunity. So he's got slightly more ability immunity there as well.
Yeah, and he has the defense up because he gets the armor on there too, so he's got an extra couple seconds of the armor.
Yeah. Moving on to Frost Lotus. Her attack speed, we suggested we actually decrease that. It's currently pretty slow at 1.7 seconds for auto attacks. Our suggestion there was to change that to 1.5 seconds.
Yeah, basically we were saying like it's one of the slowest attack speeds in the game except for Evergreen. And by the time she gets her ult off, half the things are dead or they're about to move out of where she cast it anyway. So we just wanted to be able to speed up the rate that she gets her cast off to begin with.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. We were talking about a bit how she's really only useful if you get her 2-star early and frontline her, because otherwise she just doesn't get her ultimate off in a timely manner enough to actually affect the early round fights.
Yeah, and I see that a lot in my games when I am using her. She gets her ability off at the very end and it essentially does nothing. All right, moving on. Siren was up next. We suggested a HP change once again. Her base HP is 1700, 3400, and 6800. And we suggested just a slight increase there to 1800, 3500, and 7000. Warreor, do you want to start off this one and why we increased her HP?
Yeah, Siren is still a decent unit and her effect can do really well, but it's absolutely nothing in fights. So she's not the most consistent unit. Bring an amazing secondary synergy like some of the other assassins do. So she's definitely a bit underwhelming. And the main reason is probably her squishiness. She just too stats went down too, and I think it just really hurt her.
Yeah.
So yeah, I
you
think a
agree with
little
that,
bit.
Chaos?
Yeah, so for Siren, like if she's getting her ability off when she's not getting hit, then it's wasted. So like Siren in general wants Forbidden Tomes instead of Spellbanes because she can straight whiff her ability. It'll cast no matter whether she's next to something or not. So
Right,
she
and then it
needs
does
to have
nothing.
the HP to not get killed before she casts to begin with.
Yep. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Our Voodoo Elder change was a little bit more significant. We did feel that he was a bit underwhelming. So currently he has a ability that bounces between enemies, and the current amount of bounces, depending on your star rating, is 2, 4, or 6. And our suggestion was to increase that to 4, 6, or 8. So Chaos, that would change a few things there. It's going to increase the amount of damage and stuns being delivered there as well.
Yeah, we basically were looking at Desperate Doctor from Autochess Mobile, which is where Voodoo Elder comes from, and that's always been 468. And we also think that it could probably use a damage upgrade as well, but we didn't want to change too much all at once because we figured we'd just test out what 4 bounces look like damage-wise and then add the damage. But relative to Desperate Doctor and the amount that ACM's ability changes over to this game with the increased HP is, it could still probably use more damage. Because Desperate Doctor to Voodoo Elder is like a 2.5 or 2.0 change damage. Or 2 times, and like everything else is like 3, 4, 5 times.
So Stinger's change here, we'll fly through these. So Stinger's base HP 1750, then 3500 and 7000. We suggested slight increase there to 1850, 3700 and 7400. Is that going to have a massive impact, do you think, Chaos, or is just the perfect change to get Stinger relevant again?
I think Stinger could probably use a little more. I find her to be the worst assassin in the game, but assassins are already strong, so we didn't want to overbuff too many assassins all at once and make assassins just like the absolute best build.
Yeah.
But most of the time, I won't play Stinger, even for Undead.
Yeah, there's definitely better Undead options if you're running that route, that's for sure.
Because like even in like a 6 assassin builds, to pair Stinger with Misfortune to get Undead, I'd rather have Siren, or I'd rather have any of the CC assassins with like Venom or Horn Menace, or because Stinger just like jumps into the back, she gets hit twice and dies, and it's like she didn't exist in the first place.
And it doesn't have a relevant ability. It's just a bonus to the crit.
The thing with Stinger is it also in your assassin and 2 undead from her. So I find her still worth running a lot of the time, but again, just as like a synergy.
Right, so you did cut out, I believe, when you said elf there. So yeah, her benefit is that she is an assassin, elf, undead. So she's useful in synergies, less so in ability and attack damage. All right, moving on as I cancel out these game invites that we're getting here. Void Destruction was a little bit of a more tricky one. The HP buff that we suggested would take him from 1750, 3500 and 7000 up to 1900, 3800 and 7600. And we also felt that the Aurora ability needed to be a little bit more impactful at close range, but we didn't finalize numbers there as we weren't entirely sure on how that worked. So Chaos, I know this was a bit of a pet project for you. Did you want to talk to that one?
Yeah, where you're getting a lot of static, like a fan is blowing into your mic or something.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's going with Warrior's mic there. We're having a lot of issues with him. Okay, I'm gonna actually mute Warrior for now. So we'll just run this. We'll continue along here, Chaos. So talking to Void Destruction, HP boost, and obviously some changes to his ability there as well.
Yeah, so with the ability, like he's in Autochess Mobile Thunder Spirit is the equivalent, and that unit is frontline every single time you get it because it's one of the tank sorcerers in that game, kind of like Starhorn or Dark Mage that you want up in the front line. So we felt like its HP was too low compared to the damage in this game, so that's where the HP came from. But its minimum damage, the way it's worded in the game, at least the way I read it, and Warrior disagrees and thinks there's a base damage to begin with, but the way it reads to me is that its base damage is 30 to the things right next to it, and then it will eventually go up to plus the 400, so it's like 430, 420, or 660 and like 980 or whatever.
That's definitely the way it reads to me as well, which suggests that it does very little damage to the heroes right next to it, which means that then frontlining it is not ideal because then you're not doing as much damage as you could be.
Which, yeah, and because we think Sorcerers needs a frontline unit, we wanted the HP, and then we wanted to do something with the base damage. I thought giving half of its max damage as base damage, or even 1/3 of its max damage as the base damage, was the way to go.
Yeah.
So that you're still doing a certain amount of damage that isn't negligible to the people right next to it. Because I've seen it go off in game to somebody right next to it, and it's almost like it didn't hit them.
Yeah.
That's how negligible the damage is.
Yeah, I haven't paid enough attention myself, but it'd be something worth keeping an eye on. So we'll move on to Calamity here. Our suggestion was that the shield damage dealt increases. Actually, no, sorry. It was the shield amount that it absorbs actually increases from 300, 450, and 600 to 350, 550, and 750. And I'll try unmuting Warreor here, see if he's fixed the audio issues. Your thoughts on Calamities? Yes, we got you again, mate. Your thoughts on those Calamity shield changes there? For those that are watching the video, by the way, we did try sorting this out prior to recording this, and we thought we had it covered, and obviously we didn't. We're still experiencing some technical difficulties.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. I have like a nice headset on, but I'm charging my other one right now.
Now, this does sound a lot better, so we'll work with this. So the improvements to Calamity Shield.
So Calamity is a really good unit as far as fitting into the overall build. And, she provides the undead buffer riders, which is really nice. But the shield itself is just a little lackluster. It has such low values in comparison to what people's HP is that it just usually blows up right away.
Yeah. All right, so we'll move on to Nether Prince. This is a very simple one. The ability, we just thought it would be worth adding the fact that it shouldn't be able to interrupt his ability when he starts casting it. It has quite a long cast time, the animation, and it can get interrupted quite a bit. And Chaos,
I had one game where it went off. It tried to cast 5 times and got stopped before it actually cast the 6th time. And that's Ultra feels bad for a player.
Yeah.
Another cool change that I think could be implemented is Nether Prince is magic immune while casting her ultimate. So kind of like a little mini version of what Wukong does.
Yep.
And that could kind of improve the unit a little bit more than just can't be interrupted. I mean, Nether Prince is a really strong unit, especially early and mid game, but we just thought it falls off a little bit in the late game unless you can stack it up and 3-star it.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving on to Werewolf, another very slight change. And we actually will be doing this or suggesting the same thing for Dragoon a little bit later, but during transformation, giving them immunity so that they can't die during their transformation when they're not doing any auto attacks.
Yeah, it was the same kind of thing as Nether Prince. If Werewolf's trying to transform to get his HP boost and gets killed, it's Ultra feels bad.
Yeah.
Especially if he's like 90% through the transformation animation. So we wanted to eliminate some of the feels bad parts of the game.
Yeah, absolutely.
Another thing is Werewolf is a really strong unit in most of the other auto chess games, but in this game it only summons 1 wolf as opposed to the other games when it summons 2. So it's already kind of a nerfed version of the unit, and while it's still solid, I think that it could just use a little bit of love to make it a better unit.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so moving on now to Lightbringer. We move into the elite heroes here. We thought that she in a few patches ago did actually get a bit of a buff, so we thought that her base damage, we thought this would be the easiest way to fix her, actually decrease her base damage. Currently it is 600, 900, and 1200. We suggested 400, 700, and 1000, which would decrease the overall amount of damage that she is doing.
Yeah, Lightbringer has been one of those units that just took over the meta once her changes were implemented. That she used to just get her damage based on how long she charged, so she had no base damage. So when the change got put in, not only did her ult do a lot more damage, but it became way more consistent. And I think it's just a bit too consistent now. I think a little bit of the power should be taken back off that, especially with how human resets work.
Yeah, we were doing numbers, and the reason we settled on this is because in the game right now, it's like 1800 damage. A 2-star unit that isn't an epic is got around 3800 HP, so that's half a unit's HP. By the time Lightbringer's cast finishes, any unit that's like in combat is already below 50%. So it's just an auto kill on just about any 2-star unit in the game, and we thought that was too high. And if it resets, it's gonna two-shot any epic unit that's already in combat too. So,
and I think it's also worth noting we gave buffs to Frost Lotus, Void Doom, and also Starhorn in a second. So we didn't want to make sorcerers crazier than they already are. So we had to keep it balanced.
Exactly, yeah. So kind of just redistribute some of the power that sorcerers have right now. A lot of it is just loaded into Lightbringer. And if that power is spread out a little bit, it'll just make the comp feel better overall.
Yeah, because we felt like 6 sorcerers needed the same amount of critical mass that they hit right now, or they wouldn't be viable.
Yeah.
So whatever damage we took away from Lightbringer had to be redistributed elsewhere, or 6 sorcerers wouldn't be a viable comp. And we didn't want that to happen either.
All right, moving on to possibly the most controversial hero in the game right now, Sword Dancer. Once again, recently went a nerf in that she only regains 50% of her mana when her shield is active. We suggested to further improve her in terms of balancing that it would be great if her Phantom ability cooldown time, which is 6 seconds, a flat 6 seconds, actually started at 8 seconds at 1 star, went to 7 seconds at 2 star, and then maxed out at 6 seconds at 3 star. Do you want to talk a little bit to that, Chaos?
For me, I didn't really like this change when we were doing it, but I agreed with it more because I think people just don't use their brain. Scourge will permalock Sword Dancer, Siren can permalock Sword Dancer, Banger with this change will be able to lock it pretty much enough that it'll get killed. So as long as you just use a CC unit, Sword Dancer isn't a problem. But 90% of the community thinks Sword Dancer is busted, so we figured we'd do something to it.
Yeah, it's not quite as simple as that, I think. I think you might be oversimplifying it in that often you can't control which hero targets which hero. So you might have a Scourge that's just straight up not targeting Sword Dancer.
And there are also, there are other comps that people run that aren't going to include one of those units. They're like, you shouldn't be forced to run a CC comp just to be able to deal with Sword Dancer. So just, like we were saying with Lightbringer, a lot of the assassin comp's power is allocated to Sword Dancer. So when you nerf Sword Dancer, you nerf her entire comp. So that's why we didn't want to go too crazy and just give her a little nerf tap. Just bring that cooldown down a little bit, hopefully let her snowball a little bit less, and, let her even out the power a little bit. And another assassin buff could come with that. We didn't specifically talk about one. But
well, Siren, we did suggest a
Siren.
slight
Yep,
increase.
That's right.
Yeah.
But even if they took away like some of her attack damage that she gets from the ult or something, and like gave somebody else a little bit more power, I'd be fine with that.
Yeah. All right, moving on to Starhorn now. This was another very subtle change, but we suggested that we increase her silence time for a meditation, the duration of that, from 3 seconds to 3.5. So slightly longer silence and slightly more damage there as well.
It's actually not a damage increase.
You're right, it wouldn't be a damage increase.
When I looked at it, but it ticks every 1 second, so it's just
maybe that should be a 4 second, maybe 4 seconds would be the fix there. But what are your extended thoughts on that there, Chaos?
Basically, it was like redistributing Lightbringer's power. Starhorn has always been a weaker version of Storm Executioner, which is the ACM equivalent again. And I felt with the fact that General of War and Kraken and all these other units that force Storm Executioner to be played in every build in ACM are even stronger here, that we should have just had Storm Executioner on release.
Yeah.
But, so I've been vying for Starhorn to be like straight up super buffed, all the way to like Storm Executioner power to answer
Storm Shaman.
busted
Storm
Kraken.
Shaman, right?
Yeah, Storm Shaman, yeah.
Storm Shaman, yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree that the Starhorn unit could get a little bit stronger to counteract some of the other very strong units in the game. It's definitely a nerfed version because I think another big thing is her AoE size is just not as big as it is in those other games. It seems to silence way more units, so what unit she ends up targeting ends up being a lot more important, and it can kind of whiff a lot more too. But yeah, just a little bit more CC, a little bit more control from her would be nice.
Now, we already talked about this with the Werewolf and with the other Prince, but our final hero adjustment here, Dragoon, once again immune while transforming, just to avoid any feels bad moments during the game. Now, at this point, let's move on to, we had a couple of combo fixes that we thought would absolutely improve the current meta as well. So we'll start off with Druids. Currently, there they are.
Yeah, I was just going to say, this isn't so much a combo change to Druids, but a revert to old Druids. We feel every other comp is buffed enough that we can go back to release Druids and them not be the best comp automatically.
So you've been playing since the start. Do you want to talk about how Druids were initially and what was done to fix that, and then what we're suggesting now?
Basically, when the game released, all the other comps weren't strong enough to deal with 3-star Druids, and they had way more, like they had about equal HP to 3-star other units. So like a 3-star Everbloom now has 5,900 HP. That's less than almost every 2-star epic in the game. So we want them to go back to the original HP values, so they're not just like these gimpy, weak units that get killed easier than 2 stars.
Yeah.
Because druids themselves are like reliant on lasting long. Like they're a summoning build, so like an Everbloom at 5900 HP, it might not even summon her tree on a second time.
Yeah.
Yeah, like when the game very first came out, druids were the best comp in the game probably, and everybody was spamming druids, and it's because like you guys mentioned before, they pretty much had equal HP to other units, except they were extremely easy to 3-star. So, but with the prevalence of all these new builds coming up and strong comps coming out, now druids have been left in the dust. So I don't know if they should go all the way back up to the HP they were at before, but definitely somewhere in between there, where
Yeah,
they are
absolutely.
now and where they were.
Now, the next one, Hunters, and we'll get you to discuss this, Chaos, as I believe this was actually your suggestion originally, but we all got on board with it. Currently, they provide a bonus when you have 3 or 6 Hunters on the board. Your suggestion was to change that to 2, 4, and 6 Hunters at 20%, 40%, and 60%.
Yeah, for me, like this one I've been advocating for a while. 6 Hunters is probably the weakest build in the game. With 4 Undead, they are very feast or famine. They either kill you or they get killed. And we figured to run 6 Hunters, you have to like build something else and then go into 6 Hunters, because there's such a big power trough between 25% and 60 that I wanted there to be somewhere in between, so you can just run 4 Hunters and like 2 frontline. You don't gotta have 4 riders up there. You don't gotta have like 6 warriors up there before you start building your Hunters, because
Yeah,
they're
sure.
so squishy that at 40% they might just be feast or famine enough to play 4 Hunters without any frontline.
Yeah.
And we figured that that's something you should be able to do. I kind of feel the same way about sorcerers. Like, you can't run 6 sorcerers without a frontline either. But sorcerers are busted enough that we didn't need to focus on that. Hunters are
Yeah.
the worst build in the game, so they need to go first.
Your thoughts on that change, Warrior?
Yeah, I agree that I like the 2-4-6 change because it adds a lot of flexibility to the hunters. It still doesn't change that much as far as their overall potential, because 6 hunters is still the same buff that it is right now. So I think they might need a little bit more even than that to become a really good late game comp with a full 6 hunter build. So maybe some kind of being able to negate some percentage of evasion like it is in the other games, or just something to make them stand out, or just give them a little bit more than just a little bit of attack power.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and before chat like sees 40% at 4 hunters, like you can get that rate at like level 1 almost, like the first PvP round if you got lucky. If you're doing it at the first PvP round, they're 1-star units. 40% of that's like 13 attack damage. It's no big deal.
If you can get all 3-star hunters, then yeah, that 60% is huge. But before then, it's not that big.
Yeah, it scales for sure.
It's a crit sword on most units, or even weaker.
Moving on to our final combo adjustment that we suggested. This is Riders. This is we just saw Riders take out the possibly the highest stack triple turbo tournament that I've run yet in terms of talent in that tournament. Riders did get the win there against a pretty strong human sorcerer build. Our suggested change was the percentage chances of 2, 4, and 6 riders. Currently it's 30%, 45%, and 60%. We suggested a little bit more balanced, so it's actually an increase at 2 riders, 35%, no change at 4 riders, 45%, and then a slight decrease at 6 to 55%. Do you want to talk to that, Warrior?
Yeah, so especially with some of these other changes that we've been talking about, we've been a couple of the other riders, small buffs, but Rider is still probably one of, if not the most consistent comps, and definitely one of the highest power ceiling comps in the game right now. So while a couple of individual units could use work, I think the comp overall should be taken down a peg. And this change won't affect too much. It actually is a small buff to 2 riders, but a little bit less power at 6 rider, a little bit less consistency, I think will make some of the other comps feel more, more on even playing field.
Yeah, and I know, Chaos, you are less concerned about the rider combo overall, so you'll have a slightly different perspective on this.
Yeah, I play almost exclusively turbo, and I find that as soon as you get to level 10 and you're off to level 8, where riders are so busted with 6 rider 2 warlock, that riders just fall apart anyway. So I think riders are fine, and we'll talk about it in a second, but we're also saying take the 4 shocking dagger away from unicorn, and I think it needs to be one or the other. Because if you take the Four Shocking Dagger away from Unicorn, Riders falls apart.
Yeah,
Riders
that is
still heavily dependent on Unicorn getting the Four Shocking Daggers.
Yep.
But you could even buff Riders at this point if Four Shocking Daggers could take off at Unicorn.
All right, well, let's use that to segue into our final segment here, which is important bug fixes. And there's just 2 on the list. The first one being the interaction between 4 Shocking Daggers and Unicorn Cavalier. So I'll read through her ability, which is Windblade. It's a passive ability. The flying dagger from each attack will bounce between enemies within 4 squares up to 3, 5, or 7 times after it hits an enemy. Each bounce reduces the damage by 40%. So Chaos, why is that so significant when you have 4 daggers on her?
Because the way it's coded right now, it checks the 4 daggers on each bounce. So it can completely whiff and just be a regular attack still, or it can do what it did in our squad game yesterday, where one attack dealt two units full HP because it shocked on all 4 hits, or all 5 hits. It shocked as well, so it was like an extra 1,800 damage out of nowhere that just went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth.
So for those that aren't aware, Max Shocking Dagger has the chance to deal double damage, essentially splitting off and damaging another hero as well.
Yeah, it's like 300.
No, I think the lightning can bounce. I forget exactly how many times, but it can bounce more than once.
Right.
So it's like crazy amount of bounces between her, 3, 5, 7 attack bounces as well as the lightning bounces, doing 200 damage each.
So it can take those numbers up significantly.
Yeah, the second the Shocking Daggers got introduced, everybody reported this as a bug, and Tencent's come back and said that this is an intended interaction. And we're like, if it's intended, get rid of it, and if that's like code for not knowing how to fix the bug, learn how to fix it, because this is ridiculous and it needs to be out of the game ASAP.
Yeah,
and I've been saying
it's
this,
very big.
Yeah, since 4 Dagger was introduced, it's been here, and everybody was asking about it forever. And like you said, when they finally came out and said it was intended, like, I don't think they might have a little disconnect with how strong it is in the game, because I actually have a video that I just made the other day. I can send it to you and see if you could, add it into this video and clip it in while we're talking about. But I had a 3-star dragon in with a 3 dragon build and 6 rider. And then I got my 4th dagger. Once I put those 4 daggers on a 2-star unicorn, it was heavily out damaging the 3-star dragoon in 3 dragon. So it was doing, it went from like doing 2 to 3k damage up to over 20k just by putting 4 daggers on it.
And that's a 2-cost hero outperforming a 4-cost hero, which should not be the case.
A 3-star 4-cost.
Yeah.
With a comp based around him.
Yeah, we went back and forth trying to, I tried to pull out all the numbers with Warreor, and I'm like, there is no way 4 daggers should be better on Unicorn than it is on Dragoon, but we thought the bug was fixed at that point. And then you played it again, and it was still doing it. And we're like, okay, so why is this not fixed? And it's because Tencent thinks it's allowed, but it's ridiculous at this point.
But the last thing I'll say about that is I don't know if the whole new item system is going to be introduced with Season 2. We're kind of left in the dark about what is going to be changed or not. So it might not end up being that important if they replace the items. But as of right now, it's the only win condition in the game that you can get from items. If you find 4 items and you have Unicorn, you're probably going to win the game. There's no other unit item combination that has that much impact.
Yeah, I agree. And that should not be the case for any hero, but especially not a 2-cost hero.
No. It gives her about 10x damage booster. It's crazy.
The final bug fix we had listed, and this one has also been around for a long time, both of the Oceanborn Hunters, Kraken and Shakaraka, both have area of effect abilities that have an animation that's quite visible, but both actually stun every enemy hero on the board, no matter whether they're in or out of the animated area, and the wording on their abilities suggests it should just be the area that's animated. So we felt that both of those need to actually do what they're meant to and only stun the heroes that are in their animated area. Do you want to talk about that a little bit, Chaos?
Yeah, I thought this wasn't actually a thing of the game. I've been hearing people talk about it until I played a co-op game where the Kraken got spawned on the 5th line on my team, and it stunned something on the 5th line on the enemy team. I'm like, okay, yeah, this is bugged and it needs fixed. Like, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, unlimited range. No hero in the game has unlimited range except these 2 abilities.
I think that they should just look at the unit's AoE size at each level and just optimize it across the board. So at Kraken level 1, her AoE size is terrible, but then at level 2, it's the entire board. So they should fix that a little bit. So make the AoE size a little bit bigger at level 1, a little bit smaller than it currently is at level 2, and then let it be full board at level 3.
Yeah, I think that would be a lot more reasonable, but it's definitely...
because 1-star Kraken's unplayable as well right now.
You know, it can be good if you get her early, but other than that, usually not.
Yeah. Now, to wrap up, to conclude, I think it's worth mentioning that season 2 is right around the corner, and there are obviously things that we're not aware of. So all of these are just feedback suggestions based on the current meta. I think there's rumors there's going to be a potential new class coming, which would change things as well. So obviously these may not be relevant. Tencent have access to a lot more information, and we do user stats and things like that. So these are all just fans of the game coming together, putting their minds together and coming up with some suggestions to improve the balance of the current meta. Any final words from you, Chaos?
I just want to say this was super fun to do. I've been wanting to do it for a while, so it was cool to actually get it done yesterday.
Yeah, it was good fun. And what about you, Warreor? Any final statement?
Yeah, I had a great time talking about all of them too, and it kind of like reinvigorated some of my passion for the game. I'd say like there's so many areas that the game can improve, but there's so many they're all pretty much easy improvements that they can implement. So if they make some of these changes along with some of the more bigger changes that we've been asking for, I mean, this game has nowhere to go but up.
Yeah. I think it's also worth noting that there was a lot more discussion that went into this. We looked at every hero, but obviously didn't want to bring too much to the table. So we actually spent, I think it was over 3 hours with the wider group discussing it. So it was a great time yesterday.
3.5 or 4 hours.
And a pretty good result, I think, in the document that we came up with. And this is, of course, just our suggestions. Thank you so much for checking out the video. If you have suggestions of your own, definitely leave them in the comments below. I'm sure Chaos and Warreor will be active on the comments as well, responding to any thoughts that you might have. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any future content.